So what is a for loop in Python? A for loop in Python is used to iterate over the items or elements present in a sequence. The items present in a sequence can be in the form of a list, tuple, dictionary, or even a string. A for loop in Python uses the range function to iterate over a specific number of times. Now let's have a look at the syntax of a for loop. So here on the left you can see the syntax of the for loop. So we have the for keyword followed by the iterator variable. Then we have the in keyword followed by the sequence. It can be a list, you can use the range function, it can be a dictionary, a tuple, anything. And after that you have your colon followed by the statements that you want to execute in the for loop. And below you have the rest of the code. And here on the right you can see this is the flowchart of a for loop. So you have for each item in sequence, then we check the condition. If you have reached the last item, if that is true, you exit out of the loop. But if it is false, you keep on running or executing the statements that are present inside the for loop. This will continue until and unless you have reached the last item in your sequence. Okay. Now let's head over to our Jupyter notebook where we'll see for loop in detail and we'll explore a lot of code examples. Okay, so here I am on my Jupyter notebook. Let's start by writing a simple for loop. Suppose I have a variable, say s, and it has a value which is a string, let's say Simplilearn. Okay, now the way to write a for loop is I'll say for I, which is my iterator variable. It can be any valid variable name in Python, in my variable that is s. So here s becomes my sequence. I'll say print I. So what this for loop is going to do is it will iterate over all the characters that are present in my string and print them one by one. Let me run it by hitting Shift Enter. You see here, using this for loop, we have iterated over all the letters that were present in my string that is Simplilearn, and we have printed them one by one. Okay. Now the print function in Python provides a parameter called end. So by default, the value of the parameter is \n, that is the new line character. Now you can end a print statement with any character or string using this parameter, which is end. Let me show you what I meant. So I'll again have my same string Simplilearn. I'll say for I in my variable or my sequence s. I'll say print I, comma, then I'll use my end parameter equal to, and my end parameter will have a value of asterisk. Now let me run this. You can see here this is sort of a pattern that we have printed. So between each letter in my string Simplilearn we have an asterisk. Okay. Moving ahead, let's see how to use for loop in a list. Alright, I'll declare a list called programming, and this list will contain a few programming languages. Let's say we have Java, and then the next item we have in the list is Python. Next we have Ruby, and then we'll have HTML. Okay, so I'm going to print all the individual items that are present in my list using the for loop. So I'll use the same syntax. I'll write for. This time I'll use my iterator variable name as iter, which means iterator. For iterator or iter in my sequence, which is programming, I'll say print iter. Let's run it. You see here we have printed all the items in my list one by one: Java, Python, Ruby, and HTML. Alright, now let's see an example how you can find the average of a list of numbers using for loop. So I'll give a comment saying find the average of a list of numbers. Okay, so here first of all we'll declare a list of numbers with variable list underscore num equal to, it will have a few numbers, let's say 20, 25, 10, 50 and 40. Let's make it 45. Now to find the average of a list of numbers, first I'll declare a variable called sum that will have a value of 0. So we have initialized the sum variable to 0. Then I'll start my for loop for I in my sequence, that is list underscore num, which is this variable. I'll give a colon, I'll write sum equal to sum plus I. So here just give a space to make it more readable. So I'm adding all the numbers in my list and we are storing the result in the variable sum. Then we'll say print sum equal to, I'll pass in my variable that is sum. Then I'll say print average equal to, now our average will be my variable sum divided by the length of my list that has all the numbers. Let's run this. You see here, so our total sum of all the numbers present inside the list is 150 and the average of all these numbers is 30. So 150 divided by 5 is 30. Alright. Now let's see how you can use a for loop using a tuple. So let's declare a variable called num. This is going to be a tuple of numbers and we have 30, 45, 60, 50 and let's say 70 as the numbers inside the tuple. I'll say sum equal to 0. Then we'll have our for loop for I in my sequence, that is num. I'll say sum equal to sum plus I. So here we are just adding the values that are present inside the tuple. I'll say print sum. So here you can see we have printed all the values present inside the tuple one below the other. Now if I shift my print statement to here, you can see here this is my sum of all the numbers that are present inside the tuple. So make sure you have the current indentation. Now let's see how you can use the range function in Python. Okay, so you can use the range function to iterate over a range of values or numbers using a for loop. The way to do is I'll say for I in my function range, I'll give my first index at 1 and my second index at, or my end index at 10. So this will go from 1 till 9 and exclude the 10th index. I'll say print I. You see here for I equal to range 1 to 10 we have printed all the numbers starting from 1 till 9. So the last index, that is 10, is exclusive in the range function. Now in the range function you can also give a third parameter that stands for step, so that you can skip a few steps and print the next value. Let me show you what I mean. Say I write for I in range 0, which is my starting index, 10, which is my end index, and I'll have a step size of 2. Give a colon. I'll say print display values with a step size of 2. Give a comma here and my variable, that is I. Let's print it. There you go. So we have printed the values with a gap of 2. So it starts from 0, then we are jumping 2 steps and then we are printing 2, then again 2 steps, we have 4, 6 and 8. So we are skipping one value and printing the next value in my sequence ranging from 0 to 10. Alright, now let's write a program to print a table of a given number. So I'll give a comment as program to print table of a given number. Alright, so I'll pass my variable n, which is going to be a user input. So I'm using the int function, and inside the int function I'll use the input function to take the user input. I'll give my message as enter the number. I'll say for I in range from 1 till 11, I'll say multiply, which is mul here, n asterisk I. So basically what I'm doing here is I'll take a user input of the number. Let's say we want to print the table of 5. So from 1 till 10 we'll have the product of the numbers. Let me print it. I'll say print n comma within double quotes I'll give my asterisk comma I comma within double quotes I'll say equal to, and then we'll have our variable mul. Let's run this, enter the number, I'll give 5 and hit enter. There you go. So here we have the multiplication table of my number 5. So you say 5 into 1, which is 5, 5 into 2 is 10, then we have 5 into 7 35, 5 into 9 is 45, then our last index which ends at 10, so we have 5 into 10, that is 50. Alright, so this is how you can create a simple multiplication table using for loop in Python. Now we can also use the range function with a sequence of items. The len function can be combined with the range function to iterate through a sequence using indexing. I'll show you an example here. Let's say we have a list called list2, and here we have a list of programming languages, let's say C++. You can either use a single quote or a double quote to represent the text values in a list. The next programming language I have is Java. Then let's say I have Python and we have R. Okay, so I can write for I in range. Here I can use the length function and I'll say list2, give a colon, then we'll print hello and I'll say list2 of I. So what it does is my iterator will iterate over the list of programming languages I have here, and it will keep on iterating till the length of the list, and then I'm printing my message as hello, and it will take each item from the list using the index number. If I run it, you can see here it says hello C++, hello Java, hello Python and hello R. Cool. Now let's see how you can use nested for loops in Python. I'll say nested for loop as my comment. let's say I have a list of company names. My first company I have in my list is Google. Let's say Apple, PwC, and then we have Uber. So here I'll write for I in companies, I'll say print, we will display each letter of, I'll say plus I. Now I'll use my second for loop saying for letter in I will print the letter. Let's run it and see our result. There you go. So here we have used two for loops, so that becomes a nested for loop. We have my outer for loop and then we have our inner for loop. So in the outer for loop we are just printing the name of the company. So here we say we will display each letter of plus I, which stands for my company name Google. So you can see below we have displayed each letter of Google using the inner for loop. Similarly, we have for Apple, you can see APPLE, we have PwC, and then we have Uber. So this is how you can use multiple for loops in Python. Now let's see how you can use a for loop with else clause. So I'll give a comment for loop with else clause. So I'll write for I in range 0, 10, I'll give a step size of 3. I'll say print I, and after this Python gives you the flexibility to use an else clause after the for loop. So I'll write else print the loop has completed execution. So this is my message that we are going to print after we have printed all the elements that are present inside this range function. Let's run it. You can see here we have printed the value starting from 0 with a step size of 3. So we have 0, 3, 6 until 9, and then after that we have our else block printed, which has the message the loop has completed execution. Cool. Now let me show you two more important features that you can use while writing a for loop. One is called the break statement, the other one is called the continue statement. So in Python you can break the for loop and end it before it has actually run all the elements in the iterable using the break statement. So let me show you a simple example. If I write for, just give a space here, I in range, let's say from 1 to 10, I'll use an if condition saying if I equal to 6, then break and come out of the loop. Next we'll print I. So here what we are doing essentially is we are iterating over all the values from 1 to 10, and whenever the I value becomes 6, we come out of the loop and print all the values we have iterated so far. Let me run it and we'll see the result. There you go. So here our I value started from 1. We printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then our I value reached 6. Then we use the break statement to come out of the loop. Alright. Now you can also skip the execution of further statements in the for loop during that iteration using the continue statement in Python. So when a continue statement is executed, the for loop continues with the execution of the next element in the iterable. It does not complete all the statements in the for loop body. So again I'll give a comment say continue. Okay, so I'll write for I in range, again from 1 to 10, give a colon. I'll say if my I value is equal to 6, then I'll say continue. Then we'll print I. Let me run it and we'll see the result. Okay, so if you notice this output, so we have printed values from 1 to 5, and when my I value became 6, we skipped printing 6 and we moved on to the next element in the I table, which was 7. Then we printed 8 and 9. So this is how you can use the break and continue statements in Python. Alright. Now we'll see a program to display the total goals a player has scored. So here we are going to iterate over a dictionary. So I'll give a comment, program to display the total goals a player has scored. Alright. So first of all, I'll declare a variable saying player name, and let's say we have the player name as Carmelo. Alright. I'll declare a dictionary called goals, and within curly braces I'll have my first player name addition. Let's say addition has scored 14 goals. Then we have, let's say, Burnett. So Burnett is my key here, and then we'll have value in terms of goals, let's say 3, and then we have our third player, let's say Carmelo, and Carmelo has scored, let's say, 7 goals. Now I'm going to write my for loop. So I'll write for my iterable name here is player, in my sequence name is goals, so I'll say goals. I'm going to check if my player is equal to player name. I'll say print the goals scored by the player. So I'll pass my dictionary name, and within square brackets I'll say player. Let's use the break statement, and then I'll say else will print, my message would be no player with that name found. Let's run and see the result. Alright, so here what we did was, initially I declared a variable called player name that had the value Carmelo, and since Carmelo was present inside my dictionary named goals, you can see here we have Carmelo who had scored 7 goals. So I iterated over my sequence goals and I checked if my iterator, that is player, is equal to the player name, which is Carmelo. Since this Carmelo is present inside my dictionary name, so we printed the goals that were scored by Carmelo, that is 7. Now let's say I change this player name to, we have, let's say, Messi. Now since Messi is not present inside my dictionary goals, if I run this, it will print no player with that name found. The reason being Messi is not present inside my dictionary called goals. Cool. Now we'll see 2 more examples. This time we are going to print the cube of numbers using for loop. Alright, so first of all I'll declare a list which will have a list of numbers, let's say 2, 5, 7, 4, 8 and let's say 6. Then I'll pass in a empty list, so I'll declare within empty square brackets. I'll say for I in my sequence name, that is num. I'm going to use my empty list cube and then followed by the append function. And inside the append function we'll have our cubes of the number. So I'll write I. I'll use the double asterisk operator and then I'll say 3. After that we are going to print my list name, that is cube. Let's run it. There you go. So you can see here, first we have the list of the numbers here, and then we have printed the cubes of these numbers in a pattern. Let's say I bring this print statement here and I'll run it again. Now this is much more readable. You have 2 cube is 8, 5 cube is 125, 7 cube is 343, then 4 cube is 64, 8 cube is 512, 6 cube is 216. Alright. Now coming to the last example in our demo section of this for loops in Python video, we'll write a program to print a pattern. I'll say pattern printing. Alright. So we are going to print a right angle triangle. For that I'm going to take my first variable called n, which is going to be a user input to enter the number of rows. So using the input function I am passing the message enter the number of rows. I'll say for I in range 0 till my user input n, give a colon. I'll use my inner for loop. This is going to be the number of columns. So I'll say for j in range 0 comma I plus 1, give a colon, and I'll print my star pattern. So I'm using asterisks and I'll use my end parameter. I'll have my double quotations and then we'll say print the pattern. So here what I'm doing is I'm taking the number of rows from the user and I'm iterating from 0 till n, which is my user input, and then we are assigning another for loop for the number of rows. So that ranges from 0 till I plus 1. Then I'm printing my star. Let's run it and see the output. Let's say I'll enter the number of rows as 6. If I hit enter, you can see here we have our right angle triangle printed here. So initially my I value is 0. So here my j value becomes from 0 till 1. So we have just one star printed. In the next iteration my I value becomes 1. So from 0 to 1 plus 1, that is 2, we have 2 stars printed. In the next iteration my I value becomes 2. So 2 plus 1 is 3 again. So we have 3 columns here. So 3 stars printed, so on and so forth.